Hey, I'm Matt, and there are two really good reasons why it's good to play around with the modes on single strings. To understand what they are and how they're used, and to learn the hell out of the fretboard and where all the notes are. This video builds on the last one, and so you might want to go back, and there's a link in the description. But the main things we want to remember are that all major scales have the same pattern of steps. And then on each step, we can build a chord, and those follow the same pattern in all keys. We use uppercase Roman numerals for major triads and lowercase for minor. This is by far the most enjoyable and fun way I've come across to really master the fretboard. And it's also the simplest and easiest way to visualize and understand what the modes are. Let's just define what a mode is. I like to think of it like this. A pitch collection is just a bunch of notes, and for this we're going to use the natural notes as a pitch collection. A mode is just saying that one of the notes is the main harmonic note, and its triad is the main harmony. There are 7 different notes in our pitch collection, and any one of them could be the main note, and so there are 7 modes. Part of the mystique of modes is that they have these Greek names, but these names don't really have anything to understand. They're just labels. So we can mostly think of it like the mode that starts on whichever note of the major scale. So really, we can just think of the modes as being like the first mode, the second mode, and so on. And the Greek names are like an interesting piece of trivia. As we said last time, major is the archetype, so we compare everything to an abstract major scale. And then to apply the abstraction to a real key, for theory, the most easy place to start is C major or A minor because of no sharps or flats. We established that all major scales have the same pattern of steps. If we start on C, we'll get a C major scale, which is also the same as the pitch collection of natural notes. And then we want to notice that E and F and B and C are beside each other. So the other way to think of it is just start on the open note and count up the string and remember that E and F and B and C are always beside each other, and all the other notes have a step in between. Here is the pitch collection of natural notes on each string. We're going to use these same notes for every mode, but for each mode, we'll especially focus on orienting ourselves around its main note. We'll start with mode 1, and so we're using the pitch collection as C major because we're saying C is the main note. In theory, we sort of compare everything back to major. For the other modes, we'll compare back and say it's like major, except for this note is different. But this is already the model, so we just call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Search YouTube for a C major or Ionian backing track. If we start on C and follow the pattern of steps of a major scale, we'll get a C major scale. And then just on any and all of the strings, find the note C, count out the scale using the warp zone method, and then by all means explore the range of the whole string. And then from there, just do some noodling around with the notes and just get a feel for how these notes behave over this chord. And really remember where the note C is. And then just do the same thing on the next string and so on. Let's do mode 2, Dorian. It's the same parent scale pattern, it's just that we start on D. So if we look for the E and F and B and C semitones, we can see that they fall between scale degrees 2 and 3 and 6 and 7. We'll take some time to compare and classify the qualities of the modes later in the video, but for now we'll point out that this mode has a minor triad in it, which we can see from the Roman numerals. Compared to major, Dorian has a minor third, or we can just say flat 3 because it's one lower than the major scale, and the same on scale degree 7. Here's an example of how we can use the modes to master the fretboard. There are 7 modes and there are 7 days in a week. Yesterday we were especially focused on how the other notes relate back to the Cs, and today we'll do the same process around the note D. We're still using the exact same notes that we used yesterday, but now we're starting on D, and so our warp zone second mode scale will start on D on every string. We'll play the scale a bit, we can explore the range of the string, and then we can do a little bit of noodling. Then we can do mode 3, starting on E, and the name is Phrygian. The semitones are between scale degrees 1 and 2 and 5 and 6, and then it's built on a minor triad. So we find E on every string and follow the same process. The fourth mode, Lydian, starts on F, and the half steps are between scale degrees 4 and 5 and 7 and 1. And compared to major, the difference is that we have a raised fourth. For the fifth mode, Mixolydian, we're going to start on G, and the semitones are between the 3rd and 4th scale degrees and the 6th and 7th. It has a major triad as its base, and the only difference from a major scale is that it has a flat 7th. For the sixth mode, Aeolian, we start on A, and the semitones are between scale degrees 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. Compared to major, it has a flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7. And this is also called the natural minor scale. And finally, we have mode 7, Locrian. The semitones are between the 1st and 2nd and 4th and 5th scale degree. And then it's based on a diminished triad harmony, and so basically it's quite dissonant and is the least common mode. So if you want something that sounds a little weird, then maybe this is for you. But at least do it a little bit, and it's okay if you spend more time on your favorites. Now we've checked them out in the order they occur in the parent major scale, but we can also arrange the modes in order of their sound, or usually we say their brightness. And just to make sure we get a really good chance to visualize the note relationships, let's get a side-by-side look at all the modes on a single string with an open root. I'm going to do the G string, and then try playing around a little with each mode. We'll start with mode 1, Ionian, the good old major scale. And then it has a major triad in it. And then the other notes are kind of around it. The second note is a nice, beautiful sounding note if you let it linger, or else it's easy to use it just in passing between the other notes of the scale. And then the sixth note of the scale kind of hovers around above the fifth, and so a lot of times it wants to get pulled back down. And then the seventh of the scale tends to want to go back up to the root, but you can also leave it hanging as a major seventh. And then probably the weirdest note of the major scale is the fourth note, which by itself is sort of not compelling because it tends to want to resolve down a half step to the third of the scale. But it can be used. The main reason why it's a little clunky is because it's a half step above the third, which is a chord tone. So whenever we have a note that's a half step above one of the chord tones, you can have a little bit of that clunky factor. But just use your ears and you'll be fine. Usually the major scale is first on every list, but for the order of brightness, actually Lydian gets first place. And it's the raised fourth degree that really gives it its characteristic sound. It's interesting to compare back to the major scale because it was the fourth degree of the major scale that we were saying can be a little clunky. But with the raised fourth degree, it does have a certain inherent dissonance because it's a tritone above the root. But if you think of it as a beautiful chord tone, it's actually very nice. And then every note in the scale works as a chord tone, and so it's a very free and fun scale to play with. The next brightest mode is Dorian. And Dorian is sort of like Lydian in a way because none of the notes have a clunky clash with one of the lower chord tones. And so it's a fun scale to play with freely, and it has a sort of funky minor vibe to it. You can find the notes of the minor or minor 7 arpeggio. And then you can think of the other notes as being sort of in between, and you can either use them in passing or you can hang out on them and let them act as an extended chord tone. And then we get one step darker to our usual natural minor scale, which also has a flatted sixth degree. And the flatted sixth degree is what gives it that nice darker sound. But the thing is, it's kind of like the fourth that we had on the major scale, where it's a semitone above one of the stronger chord tones. And so it takes a little care because it can be a little clunky. Then we take one step closer to darkness with our Phrygian scale. And Phrygian has the flatted second scale degree, which is what gives it its characteristic Phrygian flavor. And we have to be a little careful with the flat sixth as well as the flat second, because they are a semitone above a strong chord tone. So just mean it when you play it. And just know that it has a tendency to want to resolve back down, usually to the root or up. And then it seems that at the end of every list of modes, we find Poor Locrian, mode 7, because that's the strangest sounding and most dissonant mode. And the thing is, it's built on a diminished triad, so it's already guaranteed to sound a little out there. And it also has a minor seventh, so it can sound like a minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished harmony. And then in between, there's just a bunch of weird and dissonant sounding notes along the way.